Hello, hello. Welcome everyone joining us today. Thank you for being here, guys. This is going to be our Allbound Academy. We are just getting started here. Thank you for everyone who is joining right now. We only have a handful of people in our session yet, so we're going to give everybody a few more minutes. There's over 200 people who have signed up for this particular event, so we're going to give everybody a few minutes. In the meantime, I'd love to hear where in the world are you guys right now? I'm actually located all the way out in Colombia, Medellin, if you're familiar. So excited to hear where you all are. Go ahead and drop it in the comments and let's get familiarized. I feel like I have done a few of these sessions. If you guys have been here for assisted prospecting, there were two parts to that. So I feel like I know a lot of the people who are joining right now. Nice to feel that we're building a little bit of a community here. So we have some folks from Atlanta, Maine, Boston. Okay, very nice. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all here. We're going to give everybody just a few more minutes so that people can trickle in and we can go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and kick things off at 11:05 just to be respectful for everybody who's already here, but hoping that we can have a few more folks join us so that we don't miss out on anything. So actually, before we start, I'll go ahead. Yeah, recorded. This is actually something that I'm going to be talking about in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few housekeeping items. Yes, thank you. So, guys, a few things just to get us started here while people are trickling in. My name is Diana. I've been hands-on in go-to-market for over 10 years, RevOps, marketing, sales, a little bit of everything. Most recently, GTME work with Allbound, which is what we're going to be talking about within this academy. Recordings. This is a very popular question. This is a cohort that we are building within the Allbound Academy, 5 sessions. We will only be sharing recordings to those who attend 80% of the courses. That's 4 out of 5. And they will only be shared at the end of the Allbound Academy as a whole. So late July is when we will be sharing them. They also will not be available publicly. And so the recordings are yours if you attend for your own internal purposes, but we won't have them available for others to be able to join. So this is a very unique opportunity to be able to share with you guys how we are thinking about signals and Allbound and building an orchestration around it through this cohort. We are also going to be sharing certificates for those who complete the workbook. We're going to go through the workbook today at the end of the session, share it with you guys so that you guys have access to the entire workbook from the get-go, but we will be filling it out as we go through these different activities and sessions. So really excited. Let us know if there's any questions around anything that I have just said. You're going to see here right under my name, we are Rev Partners. We orchestrate inbound and outbound activities. And as of today, we have announced that we are joining the Walker Sands companies. So we are now Rev Partners, a Walker Sands company. Really excited about that new development. Yeah. Great. Okay, a lot of folks from Atlanta. We have some of our teammates out in Atlanta, and we also do our Southbound event there. So curious if anybody is here from Southbound or have ever heard of it. I see a lot of folks from that area. Great. All right, amazing. So guys, it's 11:05. We're officially getting started. So I am going to go through the agenda, but first I actually have a few questions to get to know this crowd and this cohort a little bit better. Let's go ahead and push our first poll. I want to understand a little bit more about where you currently sit within signals and enrichment and intent. So there's going to be a poll that's going to be popping up here so that you guys can answer the specifics of where you are within your familiarity of go-to-market motions. Are you brand new, or do you have some things built out and maybe it's not like a cohesive orchestration, but you're experimenting? Are you truly advanced in a sense where you have things built out, motions running, and potentially even have like ongoing orchestration? Okay. So, okay, great to know. So there's almost like an even split between all of them. Experimenting seems to be the strongest, and then some brand new, fewer under the advanced, but we still have some people. On that note, there is going to be an AI component to what we're going to be talking about here. So, but it's not what we're going to be talking about in depth. So if you've never heard about what is AI model or what the different models are used for, et cetera, I definitely suggest you take a minute or two to look into that. But we're just going to reference it here. We're not going to go deep into it. Great. All right. That gives me a little bit of a sense of everybody who's joining. Let's also get some understanding in regards to your CRM. We are a HubSpot company, and so we are going to be talking a little bit about HubSpot and Clay. But in general, what we're going to be talking about here is more around the strategy. Some of the SMEs are going to be specific around some of these areas, but curious if there's anybody out there in different CRMs that maybe you want to get some understanding or speak into any of the specific functionality. It does seem like most of the folks are in HubSpot and then some folks in Salesforce. Okay, great. Good to know. And then lastly, if you're currently using any type of enrichment or tools for signals, let us know in the next poll, trying to understand a little bit of that technical functionality. If you guys are using Clay or ZoomInfo or Polo, or even maybe Sixth Sense or anything else, would like to know a little bit more of what that tech stuff looks like. Let's close. Yep, let's go ahead and close the CRM poll. HubSpot was definitely the winner at 93%. Salesforce came in at 7%, and then there wasn't any votes for any of the others. And then great. Clay, info, a little bit of a polo. For those who are choosing other, could you all drop in the chat what you're using? Prospia, okay. Great. All right. Zoom info, Apollo. And there's obviously like if you're using multiple of these, that's definitely a thing. So just choose the most prominent one that you're using and serve demand base. Okay, great. Amazing. All right. Thank you guys so much for answering some of these questions. Definitely gives me a little bit of an understanding of who we have in the team. I do talk about the Allbound orchestration from both a strategic and technical point of view. So definitely happy to speak into both the strategy and how some of these things are executed. So let's go into today's agenda. So first of all, we're going to start with a little bit of the broader thought process behind go-to-market and where we are today. Then we'll dive deeper into the Allbound framework, really what it is and what it does. Some of the things that you can expect as outcomes when it comes to building out the strategy. We're also going to take a few minutes to talk about that company selection that we have, that we're building within this Allbound Academy. And then I'll go straight into the workbook, pre-work, and what comes next. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So to start talking about Allbound, we really have to zoom out for a second and talk about the components of go-to-market in 2026 and really like the entire breadth of go-to-market as it pertains to these new developments with AI and how to think about them. And so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I did share a link to the go-to-market AI maturity assessment quiz that we have over LinkedIn. If you haven't seen it, we'll go ahead and share it with you guys. But it is important to understand sort of like how your go-to-market motion is working in general to then narrow into Allbound specifically. So in this day and age of AI, you need to have a data model. There has to be processes. Your systems do need to be orchestrated, and that means having a single source of truth. There's some level of intelligence layer where AI is like deeply embedded. And then we have, okay, how do we serve that information that we're leveraging from AI to the human? And then lastly, how do we adapt the intelligence and create loops that allow us to have the system learn, right? And so in this particular course, we're going to be talking about mostly the data model and the intelligence layer, then touching a little bit on the human and AI symbiosis. But some of the other items are just like things to know about, to think about, to work on, because a lot of those items are going to be foundational to the work that we're going to be doing. And so if you went through the maturity model, or sorry, the maturity quiz, you would have gotten certain replies for the different levels that you are in each component. And so just again, like if your data is a mess, if you don't have processes, a lot of the things that we're building out here will likely break. And so this is an invitation for you to think about that before you even start going through the process of the all-bound orchestration. Okay, so now we're really talking about Allbound. And I'm just going to start from the thought process that really a lot of the Allbound work is going to be tied to outbound. And traditional outbound just had a lot of different gaps that now with the new technology that we have and this new methodology and thought process, we're able to bridge those gaps. And so having a dead TAM or no tiering or no signals or no owners are probably the top 4 gaps that we have seen in outbound, or at least traditional outbound. And so if you're there, then this is an invitation to think about some of this next steps as it pertains. So everybody that said that they're brand new, you're probably in a space where you're living through these gaps right now. I like to think about like the system having a living, breathing organism within the database. And so if you're still using lists to send to your or to your BDR team to prospect into, and those lists are just names of companies in their stale and they don't have like live signals or reasons to reach out, then that's probably the number one thing that you want to start thinking through. But all of these different gaps are things that we're going to be talking about being addressed within Allbound. Now, if you are at the point where you are experimenting, then you're probably going to be or relate a little bit more to this particular pain point, which I think is where it all really just starts, right? Like even if you started doing some enrichment or some signals, the reality of the market is that buyers are just inundated. I mean, cold outbound, if you're going that route, is just sending emails to you, probably 100 emails per week or more. All of the emails seem pretty similar, feel really similar. And so the idea of building an all-bound methodology is really anchored around 2 specific things. One, grouping signals to create relevance so that you understand really what that propensity of any given company or contact, prospect, etc., is to need and purchase your solution. And 2, having more time for your team to truly separate themselves from the rest of the noise that is happening out there, right? And so that brings me to what is Allbound. And so Allbound really is this idea of a signal-based, AI-enabled outbound system, but we're also going to be obviously incorporating inbound methodology in here. And so it unifies the buying moment with the contextual information to be able to surface the right account at the right time without anybody really having to do a judgment call. Obviously, there's a lot of strategy that goes around this, and there's a lot of decisions that we will have to make along the way so that it triggers the right people at the right time and we're able to send the right message. But ultimately, once the system is complete, you have an engine that is continuously running automatically, scoring and tiering your accounts to surface high intent leads and contacts, and sending them to specific actions based on the paths that you've created for your buyer journey. And so in this sense, Allbound really closes all 4 gaps. The dead TAM becomes an enrichment layer, the tiering becomes a scoring, the no signal becomes the sourcing, and then the no action becomes the action layer. And that leads me to how we think about the Allbound framework. So this is one operational system. We're going to be talking about all of these different layers within each one of our different sessions. We're going to talk about sourcing layer in session 2, transformation layer in session 3, sourcing and tiering in session 4, and session 5 is going to be the action layer. We're going to be you guys the secret sauce of how Rev Partners executes on an all-bound framework and the things that we keep in mind when we're building the strategy around this. We're not going to touch yet on the feedback loop. This is probably a little bit more advanced and what happens after this all is built out, and we're not going to have enough time for that. So focusing on the first 4 steps here. So what can you expect when you build out a system like this? So one of the first things that I always tell companies going into this process is, number one, there's going to be a little bit of a mindset shift. If you're still in the place where you're having your BDRs going out there and searching for their own companies and contacts, or sending lists, etc., this is a mindset shift and a process shift, because you really have to stop thinking about the way that outbound works right now and start thinking about this continuously sourcing and scoring and routing of leads. And so instead of BDRs focusing their day to day on going out there and hunting, they're going to be getting leads served to them that they will then still evaluate and do a lot of the work that they are really, really good at, but sort of cutting out that research time and that function. And so you're going to end up having 4 different things. One is the foundation of the ongoing signals. 2 is the prioritization of the automatic lead tiering. Then you're going to have the BDR motion, BDR serve, the highest intent leads. And then finally, the automation, how they get routed, what happens to them. We are going to be talking about this from the point of view that there is a BDR or somebody doing some type of prospecting. There's also going to be automated outbound, and there's also going to be marketing activities, inbound activities that are woven into the entire process. And there can be variations to exactly how you do that, and I'll speak into that later on. I do know that there's a lot of owners out there, smaller companies doing fully automated outbound. That's definitely also an option. Just thinking about how much effort you're putting into each one of the different tiers is the most important thing that you're going to get from this. And so by the end of this Allbound Academy, we're going to have this one pager of your entire Allbound orchestration or strategy. We're going to be defining what are the different sourcing activities, layers, channels, signals, etc., that we're going to be using, how the data is going to be transformed and segmented, the prioritization that we're going to be assigning each one of the different contacts and companies based on the information that we're gathering, and then what we are going to be doing with each one of the different tiers that we create and the intent scores that we create in order to do full multi-channel outreach. That also includes, as I said, some marketing work. All right. So I've shared this example in the past, but to give anybody new here some context in regards to the specific outputs that I was just talking about, I have another link that I'll probably share of specific example of the Allbound orchestration that we built for our sister company called Supered. And so what I want to highlight here are some of the outcomes that they were able to get from this type of system. So number one, they have full cycle AEs who are now getting served these right accounts. And so because they're full cycle, they're not exactly, not the entire 100% of their time is going into prospecting, and they really needed a fast way to know exactly who to reach out to. So they're getting served high priority leads. They also have every outreach contact, they have context around every single one of the outreach that they're doing. And so they understand why this person or this company has been flagged with contextual summaries. They also have a lead flow that is consistent, and they're generating pipeline and meetings from the outbound that they're doing, both from their SDRs or the full cycle AEs doing the prospecting and some of the automated prospecting. All right, let's talk for a second about the live build. So there were 52 companies in total that signed up to get the Allbound strategy built out for them live. And we're going to be choosing that company by the end of the week. It is going to be based on the folks that were actually present in this particular first session that have also mentioned that they wanted to get their live build. So if you're here, congrats, you have upped your chances. We are definitely looking for an established company that has a defined product and there's already not just product market fit, but it's also not pre-revenue. We do need the person to be a sales, RevOps, or some type of like high level stakeholder to be able to answer a lot of the strategic questions. More likely than not, we will be choosing someone who is within the HubSpot and Clay ecosystem, or at least considering Clay, but already in HubSpot, and is able to just honestly share information here with the team about their go to market gaps. We are going to be sharing all of the information that we are going to be talking about here. So, like some of the pain points, some of the gaps, but also buyer personas, ICP, scoring, tiering strategy. So you have to be willing to share that information with the rest of the class. We are going to be sharing that via Slack. If you haven't joined our Slack channel yet, we are going to be sharing that via Slack by the end of the week. And also after every session, we're going to be sharing the decks over Slack as well, and any other resources that we talk about. All right. So actually moving up pretty quickly through this. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our workbook. Before I go into the workbook, any initial questions from anybody in the team out here? Yep. We'll go ahead and share the Slack channel in just a moment. And I'm also going to go ahead and share right now in the chat the link to our workbook. So please, please, please don't be that person, and please do copy the workbook. I am going to take over screen sharing here. All right, let's share this screen. Let me know if you guys can see it. I think I see it. I think we're good. All right, guys. So the intention behind this academy is that we are building something that you can use. By the end of the sessions, you will have this workbook fully completed. And by the way, this will be the only session where we don't have a subject matter expert. In all of the rest of the sessions, we'll have people actually coming in and showing you within the tools how we execute a lot of these different things. Watch out for session 3 and 4 specifically. We'll have folks from HubSpot and Clay. And then next session, we're going to have our own GTMU show you guys best practices within Clay for standardization of enrichment, data points, etc. And then the final session is going to be with Super, talking about how we enable tiering for prospecting. So please, 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 let's go ahead and copy this workbook, create your own copy. As I mentioned at the top of the call, we are going to have a certification deliverable after the Allbound Academy. It does require this workbook completed in order to get your cert. We'll give you guys more information in regards to that later on. So I just talked about the 5 different layers, and you're going to see here the spread of all of the different layers. Every single layer has like a 2 to 3 page workbook, and I'll go through every single one of them. But essentially what's going to happen is I'll share methodology. I will go through the company that we're going to be choosing, their build, to go through the workbook so that you guys can see live how I'm building this workbook. And then we will have an SME, the subject matter expert, that's showing us how to do things within the tools and etc., so that you guys can take this information back and do it yourselves. All right. Okay, so how does this workbook work? For the first session, I'll go through the first session. We're talking about Allbound, and for today, the activity that we're doing quickly is going to be everything that has to be with your diagnosis. So again, if you haven't done the quiz yet, go ahead and enter the quiz. Make sure that you are having some level of understanding of where you need to bridge some gaps even before we talk about this, about Allbound specifically. And then once you go through that information, go ahead and do another self-assessment in regards to where you are within this 4 gaps that we talked about. Do you have a tab that is just sitting in your database and not getting updated? Are you doing any type of tiering? So scoring is probably like version, I like to think about version 0. So scoring is probably version 0. If you're not aggregating scores from contacts and companies and building some type of 1, 2, 3, hot, warm, cold, or tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, then you still don't have tiers. If you're using any type of signal or not, or if you have any type of ownership or not. And then the specific homework for today is going to be a little bit of research. A lot of people tell me, I already have a lot of these things built out. That's great. Just if you have them built out already for yourself, just put the information or group the information in a way that is actually going to make sense for you, and make sure that this is going to start fitting into what we're going to be doing. And so just make sure that you have specific answers to these questions. So when you think about who is the best qualified company and contact out there, I usually like to ask these questions. Who do you sell to best? And what are the prerequisites for a customer to use your solution? So as an example, for our partners, we cater to folks within the HubSpot ecosystem. That's a hard requirement for us. You either have to be within a HubSpot system or you have to be willing to purchase or at least entertain the idea of HubSpot. So those types of qualifications, if you're not able to serve a specific company that doesn't use a certain technology, or if you're not able to serve specific people in different types of the world, those are the things that we want to sort of start thinking through and start with bullet points. I don't need, please don't do paragraphs. You're going to see how this information starts fitting in within the rest of the info. So just bullet points on this different qualification criteria. I usually like to either do one of two things for this qualification point and even the signals point. I do both interviews with sales folks, so anybody doing prospecting, anybody doing sales, and I also do a transcript review via AI of the latest deals that have been closed won or the latest prospects that have booked a meeting, right? If there's like a function where your SDRs are calling. And so the reason for doing that is you're just grouping all of the different transcripts and essentially running them through AI, Claude, OpenAI, whatever you want to use for this. And you're and then you're asking these questions and you're getting this distilled information about like, why are people reaching out to you? What prompts somebody to engage with you in a sales process? What are the best people to really talk to when you're getting these deals closed won? And getting some of that real raw information outside of what you think is happening. I usually like to use that both as a validation and as a point of seeing additional triggers that might be out there. So going back to qualification, again, when a deal closes fast, like who are the people involved in that deal? What have prospects said when they choose a competitor over you? And then when you're thinking about signals, I want us to start thinking about forgetting about signals. And we're going to have a whole session on signals, but the most important thing here is what is the triggering event that causes a prospect to take a meeting in the first place? What is the thing that is happening to them, that is happening in their environment, that causes them to need your solution? And I know for those of us who are in sales, it's like, well, I can, create the need is something that is very common within sales. But really, when people are allocating budgets, especially if you're in enterprise level sales, there has to be a pain, there has to be something that triggers them. And we're going to think about that so that we can then sort of like reverse engineer that into a signal. We then have to think about the specific leadership changes that might open the conversation or any type of successful marketing activities that we're not yet being able to source into our CRM. And so when I talk about the most successful marketing activities, is like, are we on LinkedIn and just doing really great on LinkedIn, but like people don't really reach out to us on LinkedIn? Is that something that we can as a signal? Are we just doing really well with content, right? Like there's just a lot of things that we can think about from a marketing perspective to start reverse engineering that into signals. And then lastly, we do want to understand what makes your reps reach out to a particular contact and company. This is only going to be obviously relevant if you currently have a prospecting motion. If you don't, still think about like what are those characteristics of the people that come to you that have a higher urgency versus those that stall for a time. There's a difference between stalling and having like a lengthy enterprise sales process, by the way, so just keep that in mind. If there's any specific methods in which you're currently reaching out, and if there's a specific person that is more likely to reply over others. Okay, so again, this session, you're going to be doing some research. Please look for this information, add it in regards to bullet points, make sure that you have this info. We're not going to go back to do research ever again within this entire flow of information. And so it's important that you have this info sort of like ready to go as we go through the next stages. Great. So that's going to be for today. Quickly going over some of the other things that you're going to find in your workbook. We're going to be discussing enrichment and segmentation layers. We're going to talk about like what are the things that we need to know for the different enrichment data points? How do we think about them? How do we think about segmentation, your buyer persona mapping, who's relevant for you, who should you be sourcing within the different activities, and then the actual sourcing layer. How do we think about signals? How do we think about grouping those signals or the type of signals, or even the relevance of each one of those? Like, which signal do I start with? What are the things that I should care about to really prioritize one signal over another? Why does it matter to me, or do I need all of the different signals? We also think about like, are the signals actually a company signal or a context signal, and why does that matter? And then we'll go into the scoring layer, where I'll go into how we do the scoring and tiering. We do execute our scoring and tiering directly within HubSpot, but it is enabled with all of the Clay information, signals, context, etc., that we bring. So how do we do our context signal? How do we fit in engagement, activity versus signals? How do we then push that into the different intent scores? And then how do we go into the aggregation of all of those different components so that we can think about these tiers, right? Now, when it comes to the tier definitions, we also think about then like, what are these tiers actually telling me? And then how am I going to be handling? What is the action that I'm going to be taking behind them? And that leads us to the action layer, where we're going to be talking about what are the specific actions that I'm taking with each one of those tiers, who's owning it, what am I doing with them, how do I build my first sequencer, how do I do AI enabled content, and then how do I use different content methodologies in order to really create that hyper personalization within AI content that is easy to execute on one side, but also I feel like there's a lot of like gaps in regards to the knowledge of the folks that are starting to do some type of AI content. One thing to note about Clay, guys, is that Clay, there is no real like Clay learning, right? Like, there are things that you can do within Clay in order to add context about your business, add context about your buyer personas. Yes, definitely we'll go through some of that. But when it comes to specific columns or Clay gens or prompts, a lot of people ask us about feedback loops. I'm going to talk to you guys about how I think about them. But when you think through like the specific Clay gent within Clay, it's not learning on its own. You have to, it's more the Claygens are more like a rubric and less like a self-learning organism. And so we have to think about how we refine a lot of this data so that you don't end up looking like a fool sending, random emails of content that is unarticulated to your different prospects. And then lastly, there is no session for this, but your final output should really be this all-bound orchestration, where you're going to be adding the information in regards to your sourcing layer. What are the signals that matter to you, to your business? How are you going to be doing enrichment and segmentation? How are you going to be prioritizing and tiering? And then what are the actions that you're going to be taking for each one of your different tiers, and what your multi-channel outreach strategy is going to look like. So by the end of this course, you're going to have the entire workbook filled out with all of the information that we will go through within each one of these different sessions. All right. I will pause there. Guys, I want to hear a little bit from you. Any initial questions in regards to Allbound Academy, to the methodology, to why we're doing this, to what Allbound is? I'd love to hear questions from the team if there are any. Okay. So if there are no questions, I'm actually going to start talking to you guys about a little bit of the transformation layer, which is usually in next session, but we just went through that really, really quickly. And I don't want to waste any time because I know in some of the next sessions, we're actually going to have a lot of information to go through. So I talked to you guys just now about let me go back here for a second and we can continue. Okay, so let's take a look again at the Allbound orchestration. So this, right? And I'm telling you guys, well, you actually have to start from a sourcing layer. The reason why we start from a sourcing layer is because to be able to create a way to, on an ongoing basis, surface signals is one thing. So for example, you can use your existing database and just tell the system, hey, I want to check if any of these things happen to any of these companies or contacts and just like flag them to me. We think about signals as a sourcing layer, which is who are the people out there exhibiting these specific behaviors that we don't currently have in our system. Now, if we do have them in the system, we just flag the signal as well, so that's also relevant. But we're really thinking about this as the sourcing layer. What are the things that these people are doing out there that I don't have in my system that I need to bring them on? But before I can think about signals and sourcing, I like to start with the transformation layer because you likely already have a database that you are sort of sitting on if you don't have any type of enrichment or if you are not enriching it on an ongoing basis, because that's another thing. A lot of times we enrich and we just sort of set and forget, if you will. And so we think about the transformation layer first from the point of view of like, let's get your entire database in a place where we can actually action on it. And I like to think about that as my prospecting universe. So it doesn't mean that the entire database needs to be enriched, but I do need to know within my database who I can prospect into so that then I can start feeding in those sourcing list building activities that will then augment my prospecting universe. So let's talk about the transformation layer. So there are actually 3 different components to turn that raw database into a working database. The first one is enrichment. We are going to be defining the data points for the different companies and contacts and sourcing all of the relevant information. I like to think about enrichment in the sense of what are going to be the data points that I care about that we're later going to be using for the scoring. What that means is that for every single record, company or contact that I am enriching, I am always sourcing the exact same information. Now, whether they have that information available or not will then impact the score itself. But from a baseline, I am always enriching company and contacts with the exact same data point. If they don't have that data point, is because I have not, if they don't have the data point, is because I have not enriched them. The second thing is data normalization. I love GTMEs, but guys, we have to be really careful when we have folks working within Clay because there is a very important RevOps component that speaks into data normalization that some GTMEs might not be super careful around, and that ends up having a lot of repercussions within your database, right? So every single time we are feeding information into the system, we're ensuring that we're using the same properties and that the data that we are pushing into whatever CRM we're using is fully normalized, meaning there's drop down properties that we're using, and then obviously like the values that we have within Play or whatever other tool you're using are feeding into the drop down properties. Without this, it's going to be really difficult to later create your list, which essentially your segmentation lists and your different workflows and activities that we're going to be using. And then lastly, categorization. So I heavily recommend that you use some type of segmentation strategy in order to go through. Essentially, we need a segmentation strategy, which is the categorization, in order to do the routing, the action that we need to take later on in order to do the AI content. So for example, when I talk about categorization, I'm talking about segmenting your companies into different ICPs, and your contacts into different buyer personas so that later on, with context that I regards to the different buyer personas and the different ICPs, it's easier for me to inform my AI in regards to what are their specific pain points, what are the things that we should be talking about for each one of these different segments that I have. So, how does that work? Well, the first thing to think about is the company data points. So, I think about three things when I'm deciding what are the different company data points that I'm going to be sourcing. The first one is the firmographics, and usually that's a starting point for everyone. So, revenue, industry, location, size. It will also inform a lot of the inclusions and exclusions. If you think about that first question that I talked about when it comes to qualification, this is the first place where we start removing companies from the list, right? So do they fit the size that I need? Do they have the minimum requirements of the people that I can serve with my solution? The second set is the qualifiers. What are those minimum requirements of HubSpot for us or location or et cetera that actually make this company truly qualify for me? It could be that they have specific system in place, as I was saying earlier, or it could also be that they are a large organization that leverages a BPO service, or that they have a warehouse in Savannah, right? Like whatever those components are, this is what I'm thinking about for qualifiers. We truly sit down to think through what are the things that I care about that actually make this company an ideal customer profile for me. And then the last one is the contextual information. What are the things that, while not necessarily mean that a company is qualified or not for me, still could be good data points for me to leverage within my scoring, any type of emails that I'm going to be doing later on, and just in general, like how much more likely they are to purchase my particular solution. And so, as an example, for Rev Partners, because again, we work with CROs, we do RevOps, GTME work, strategy work. We really care about things like, do they have a RevOps team? How big is that RevOps team? Do they have any particular tech stack that we are working through? Do they have they been acquired? Is there any funding? And there is a difference between the enrichment data points and the signals, and I'll go into that later on. But here, think about what is the context that you need about that company. And then lastly, we will go into contact enrichment. And it's very similar in regards to the contact data points. This is going to be the demographic information. I usually like to keep this really simple. And then the contextual information. Again, time in the company, maybe if they're part of any communities that you care about. For us, it would be, are they part of any RevOps community? Are they, do they have a certificate in any of the RevOps sort of like rubric that we care about? And so a lot of this contextual information, you can also think about it as like web scraping. And again, I don't want anybody to worry about like what is actually possible versus not. Surely there will be things that are not possible, but for the most part, the flexibility that we have with Claygens, and if anybody's not familiar with Claygens or any other type of like AI functionality, you could also do this with Claude or whatever other tool you're using, except Clay specifically has all of that like orchestration within the tool, and so you don't have to put pieces together. But in this case, I'm talking about like AI web scraping, right? And so don't think about what we're able to do. Just think about what are the things that you would love to know that would be really helpful to you that you're able to like leverage in one way or another, either for content or for context, right? Okay. So when we talk about the enrichment, we also want to take into account waterfall enrichment. So in this world, there are a few people that are using Prospio. There's a few others that came through. I think one of the most important things about having this concept of a living, breathing organism within your database is that there has to be information, right? Like even for the scoring. So like there has to be information for you to be able to do anything with it. And so in the world of enrichment, we think about fill rates. So fill rates are the idea that if I want to enrich data points for 100 companies, can I get to 90 or 95 companies fully enriched? And obviously, fill rates pertain to each one of the different properties, but essentially, I want the most amount of accurate information as possible. So when we think about that, we really dive deep into the concept of waterfall enrichment, which there are different ways in which you can do waterfall enrichment. In this case, I'm talking specifically about Clay. Clay actually has the functionality built in. It's probably one of the flagship features that sort of like launched Clay into stardom, if you will, which is the idea that we can use several different providers to be able to enrich any given data point, and get to the highest possible fill rate, right? And so if I want a work email, then I can run it through one source first. If I don't get an answer there, I don't spend any credits. It goes into the next one and into the next one, into the next one. And I'm not spending any credits as long as I'm not getting any information. And that way, we're able to get to the most amount of information possible within the data set that I'm working with, right? So definitely suggest that if you're not doing waterfall yet, this is definitely something that it's just very important to get to the maximum amount of data, accurate data possible. And also, when I say accurate, you also need to validate it. So if you're not currently doing it, then we also suggest that you're validating work emails, validating phone numbers, so that we're also not just building junk within the database and have a truly orchestrated living, breathing organism. All right. And then lastly, I think I'll go into this last, and then we will break from there. So when we talk about data normalization, we talk about this idea of having these drop-down properties. Oops, sorry, this drop-down properties, and so making sure that you're creating, yes, ClayGens, maybe for some of the more complex ones, like industry is usually one that I like to have very well organized. I usually create my own industry drop downs because there's some that I care more about than others. And so I want to standardize them. But also things like, do we have an ICP property that we can leverage? Do we have a specific way in which we want to show revenue range? You're going to be working with a lot of different data providers when you're doing enrichment in a waterfall way. And so just think about all of those different providers giving you all of this different information in different formats because they don't really care what format you want or think about that. And so you need to be able to group them all together in a way that gives you a very specific output so that you're not then having to second guess within HubSpot and figure out like, what is this? Does this 1 billion actually fit within this range that I have over here? And if you're in RevOps, you might relate to this. You also don't need to create a 3 series of workflows with 100 different branches each to figure out which region this person is in. You can just do a 1-column ClayGen that is able to then standardize the outputs that you need to be able to push it into a drop-down property. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. I actually didn't think we were gonna go through all of this information from session 2, but not here to waste any time. So glad we were able to get through that. I know that we're about 10 minutes away from our session ending today. Is there anything that we want to ask? Are there any questions? Are there anybody curious about anything from the next few sessions? I'd love to hear from anyone who has built or said that they were experimenting and exactly what they are doing right now. Yes, I am going to show exactly how we do each one of these steps. And so I will, so the first part that goes into the different questions in the workbook. So slides 3 to 5, which is what I am encouraging you guys to do as a result of this first meeting. I won't be showing it live because it's more about like sitting down and going through these questions and doing interviews and potentially even pulling transcripts. So I will leave you guys that homework. It's really just research, sit down, think about this, ask your boss, like whatever version of that is for you. And then as of the next session, I'll actually start going through the workbook with the that we choose. If you miss the top of the call, we are going to be choosing a company by the end of the week to do the rest of the sessions. And then when I go into that specific part of the session, I will go into this is how I would fill it out for this particular company so that you guys can see it. In regards to recording, I do want to remind everyone that we're actually only going to be sending the recording if you have joined 4 out of 5 sessions, and we're only going to be sharing it at the end of the call. And then I think there's another question. Yes. So when a team has all 4 gaps at once, what's the sequencing recommendation? Do you always fix data infrastructure before touching outreach, or is there a faster path to signal? Yes, that is a great question. And so there's a few ways that I think about the all-bound orchestration. So a lot of companies, what they're doing is they just take a list, they run it through a single clay workbook where they're sourcing, enriching the company, enriching the signal, sourcing the contacts, and then doing an outbound campaign based on that. When you're approaching outbound from that perspective, that is not scalable. Why is that not scalable? Because there is no trigger that is automatically pulling the right information at the right time. You're just doing it based on you're essentially using AI and functionality available in order to um, do the work one time, and then you actually have to like rebuild it and rebuild it as you go. And so the recommendation here is that you do build this as a system. I tend to think of it as like an ABM system. That's what we're going to be doing within this Allbound Academy. And so when you build the system, this all of this information is activating within their own parameters on an ongoing basis and flagging the right accounts at the right time. For you to be able to do that, you do have to have some level of data foundation. As an example, some things that have happened that I have seen happen in the past is you have duplicates. And so when you do enrichment for a company, the system looks up which company it is in HubSpot, and then there's 2 results. You're pushing the information into one, and then maybe the next time you're pushing the information into another, and then you end up with a situation where you have 2 companies that are maybe part of the same tier, or you're doing 2 different things for, and you're sending unarticulated messages, or maybe even assigning them to different SDRs, and they're reaching out on their own to these different accounts. So there is some level of like true data foundation that is needed in order for you to do full outbound in this particular case. Not to say that you can't start with sending outreach to a single signal, but because buyers are so inundated, it is very unlikely that that type of outreach will actually have meetings booked as a result. Great. Going back to some of the first questions that you guys are sending, I'm just gonna quickly share my screen again in this last few minutes. For those of you who missed the housekeeping items, let's go into that really quickly here. So recordings will only be available for those who attend 4 out of 5 sessions, and we are sharing the secret sauce of how we do this at Rev Partners. And so we are keeping this within this particular cohort. There is a Slack that we have sent a few times here over the chat for you guys to join us. We will be sharing who the company that we're going to be choosing is by the end of the week and pushing it live on Slack. And then to be able to get the certificate, you do have to complete the workbook. We'll be getting it, assessing it, and then providing you guys with the certificate at the end of all 5 sessions. All right, let's see. Yes, okay. Perfect. Okay, any other questions? I'll quickly go into this one. We recently onboarded Alan Do you want to come off mute? Is that a possibility? No? Okay. We recently onboarded with ZoomInfo and have been creating lookalike audiences based on one of our four of our ICPs by territory for our RSMs. We are then syncing the identified companies' contacts to HubSpot. Once in HubSpot, these companies are set as leads and enter our lead pipeline. We let ZoomInfo score companies' contacts. We have created a separate scoring model in HubSpot for records that work their way into HubSpot organically. Yeah, that's great. And so when you are working directly with ZoomInfo, I think there's definitely a lot of things that you can do, connecting the lookalikes into HubSpot. I know depending on your tier, you'll also have access to some of the signals that they source, especially offsite intent signals are really interesting for me. If you guys are not familiar with offsite intent, it's essentially anybody who is researching a particular keyword, topic, competitors of yours, etc. You can set all of those things up, and so bringing in those types of signals are usually are the folks that are like highest intent. That's something that's really interesting from ZoomInfo. HubSpot now also has that and called Vector in order to do that. I don't know why I ended up going into that tangent, but some of the signals that you have available within ZoomInfo are definitely interesting. And then obviously doing the scoring with this within HubSpot, that's also how we do it. Perhaps as we go through this academy, you'll be able to see if there's anything you can use from the way that we do scoring and tiering to even level up that scoring and bring it in. Yes, custom intent signals in ZoomInfo. That's great. And so what I want you guys to take away from this entire Allbound Academy is that the tools are really not what's going to design your strategy. Don't let the tools dictate the strategy. You're going to be thinking about what are the real world triggers that I care about, that mean that somebody is in market, in order to then engineer that within the technology available. So that's probably my biggest call out. How do you recommend determining the right time to enter prospects into the CRM? We're trying to balance maintaining a clean CRM while ensuring we don't miss out on valuable pipeline opportunities. That is a great question. So where we left it off today is the enrichment data points. Next week, we are going to start talking about the segmentation strategy. And the segmentation strategy is specifically important because we do not push anything into HubSpot or our CRM unless it specifically is our ICP and or buyer persona. So depending on how you go about it, you determine, and this is part of your prospecting universe. And so we do suggest that you have your prospecting universe within HubSpot, even if there's no activity from them. You still want to have your entire source of truth within the prospecting universe in your CRM. And so if they are qualified, right, because that's part of what we're doing in the segmentation, we're making sure they fit our criteria, that they have the qualifiers, the data points that we talked about earlier that were the qualifiers. And so that is where we then push them into HubSpot. All right. Great. Well, we are at time. We did go through things really quickly today. I hope to get a little bit more interaction from you guys. Next time, we're going to start talking about what you guys found within your research, how you're grouping the information together, and then we'll dive deeper into exactly how to go through the different data points and the segmentation strategy. The workbook, we will talk about later how to send it. We're going to be providing a link for you guys to include the workbook directly in there. But that's all that we have for today. Thank you all for joining and see you guys next week. Bye.